Okay, so you know that trope where someone needs to put down a person that they love because they're too dangerous to themselves or to other people? Well, don't let this innocent smile fool you, alright? This man's life goal is for you to feel like that all of the time. And let's be honest, as Souls fans, we can't help but eat that shit up. While fighting an old ally is far from unique inside of video games, Souls games really take that concept in such a unique direction. While in other games they will spend a whole bunch of time building up the relationship between you and your eventual rival in a well-crafted and concise story, Souls games take a much more subtle and deeper approach to this idea. There isn't tons of dialogue shared between you and the people that you're fighting throughout the games, as many of them are simply just victims of circumstance. Many of these fights are against once great people who either lost themselves or succumbed to either the world or their own fears. Take the iconic final boss of the first Dark Souls game, since I have to glaze Gwyn as often as humanly possible. I want to just play the first 10 seconds of his boss fight to really capture what I'm talking about. Now, even without any kind of context of the fight, you can immediately imagine what kind of battle that this truly is. It's a very different feeling that you get as opposed to all the monsters that you fought up to this point while some epic score plays in the background. You are fighting against an old man who cannot let go of the past, with an unbelievably sad Plin Plin Plon song playing to invoke that feeling of doubt inside of yourself. Where you start to doubt if the enemy in front of you really deserves to die. And these types of bosses end up being the most meaningful inside of the games for me. But the sadness and the fights are not always as obvious as Gwyn's. So in this video, I want to take a look at what I believe to be the saddest fight in every Souls game, from Demon Souls all the way up to Elden Ring. Now, some super quick ground rules. These games are depressing as shit, so of course there are many fights I could talk about, but I'm going to be restricting myself to only one unfortunate winner for each of these games. And sadness is of course subjective. I remember crying when Brian Griffin died back in 2013, but someone else could easily just laugh at the stupid cartoon dog getting hit by a car, right? So let me know if there's any boss that I didn't mention that had some kind of impact on you in the comments. And with that out of the way, let's kick off our list with Demon Souls like always. Okay, almost all of the battles you have in Demon Souls are definitely the most justified in the series, since a lot of these are just against evil demons. Seriously, if you ever want a good laugh, just look at the lore of some of the bosses in Demon Souls. For the Tower Knight, all the wiki says is that he is a large knight covered in thick metal armor, wielding a lance and a shield. It towers over the player, with the player character coming just to below his knee. Like, what the fuck kind of lore is that? To be fair, the wiki does leave out the bit about him being an old knight of the Round Table, but I just think it's so funny that seemingly every Souls boss has like an essay written about them, but the Tower Knight is just, yep, he's big as shit and he wears armor. However, this definitely does not apply to every boss inside of this game. One of the biggest exceptions to this is the Archdemon fight at the end of Chapter 5, Maiden Astrea. Before the events of the game, a group of priests accompanied by knights decided to make a pilgrimage to a place called the Valley of Defilement, including the saint of the church herself, Astrea. And as the name of the place suggests, it was a disgusting, vile place where those who were poisoned, deformed, and plagued were just kind of left to die. There are even aborted babies that can be seen inside of the river, so yeah, some real hell on earth type shit. And of course, seeing a place like this deeply affected the group of religious priests and knights, with it having an especially profound impact on Astrea herself. It made not only her, but everyone else question their faith in their god. How could such a horrible place be allowed to exist in our world? This question ate away at Astrea until she denounced her god that had abandoned this valley and embraced the demon's fog, transforming her into an archdemon of this valley. She made this pact not out of selfishness, but with the hope that she could use this power to take away the suffering of those inside of the valley. But when rumors began to spread about the saint herself becoming a demon, many of the followers, of course, set out to the valley in order to disprove this crazy rumor, many of which, of course, died in their search, with the residents of the valley offering the souls of these dead followers to Astrea as a form of gratitude. She used these souls to keep her and her bodyguard Garl Vinland sane in this awful place, as well as give life to those aborted babies that I mentioned earlier. Although I would not really call this a life. And even though this seems like a noble cause, using the lives of her followers to help the people of this valley is the last thing you would expect from a saint, really solidifying her new role as the archdemon of the valley. Her altruism was extremely flawed, but of course the details didn't concern her much at this point, as she had fully accepted this role for herself. And when we enter her arena, we get to see many of these poor souls that she had used up to this point, along with her surprisingly human form that she's maintained. And keep in mind, all of the archdemons that we've seen up to this point have been disgusting demons, so this is definitely a change of pace. The fight itself is actually against her loyal bodyguard who is defending the saint that he vowed to protect. And after you finally kill him, you can simply approach her, where she accepts defeat and fully understands that you are only after her demon soul. And before you can even kill her, she does the job herself. After you kill her only companion left, I really believe that she finally accepted the kind of misery that she brought on the world, despite her only wanting to make this awful valley a better place. This fight really stands out compared to all of the others inside of this game, and even without knowing any of this on my first playthrough, I knew that this fight had so much more meaning behind it than I was understanding at the time. And that is why I believe Saint Estrella is the saddest fight in all of Demon Souls. Okay, Dark Souls 1 is where they started going all in on the depression. There are plenty of sad fights that I could talk about, like Priscilla or the Ceaseless Discharge, but I'm sure everyone watching this with any kind of knowledge on Dark Souls 1 is just waiting for me to start crying about Sif. But only the most eagle-eyed viewers would have noticed that the title of this video doesn't say anything about it being only boss fights. And since I talked about Sif twice on this channel already, I wanted to talk about a fight in this game on par with Sif in terms of how sad it makes me. I am of course talking about everyone's favorite son bro, Solaire of Astora.
That is my best friend. That's a man that I love. I love him like he's my brother.
Solaire himself is a brave warrior of sunlight who came to Lordran in search of his very own son. And to be clear, I am referring to the star in the sky and not a child. He has absolute unwavering faith in the sun, as you can see by not only his unshakable spirit, but also his armor. And yes, I can confirm that he did in fact paint the symbols himself. It's for this belief in the sun that he came to the same place ruled by the Lord of Sunlight himself, Gwyn. And, quick fun fact, before we knew Gwyn's firstborn was the Nameless King in Dark Souls 3, there was actually a super common theory that Solaire himself was actually Gwyn's forgotten child. But of course, now we know that wasn't the case. I just wanted to mention it because I was such a firm believer of this at the time. But when you get into lore and make guesses like that, sometimes you just gotta take the L. Anyways, back on track. Solaire's abilities are also a result of his hard work and training, as none of his equipment is even enchanted. He has truly dedicated his life to his belief in the sun and his desire to find his very own someday. And when you first meet Solaire after the Taurus demon fight, the thing that stands out the most is his cheerful attitude.
The way I see it, our fates appear to be intertwined. In a land brimming with hollows, could that really be mere chance? So what do you say? Why not help one another on this lonely journey?
Reasonably so, a lot of the people left in this world have given up in one way or another. So in a way, he really is almost like his own bright sun in this bleak world full of death. He gives you the ability to help other players and encourages jolly cooperation. Solaire himself is actually available to be summoned to help you with a surprising amount of bosses in this game. And not only that, he pops up several times throughout your adventure. It's almost like you keep bumping into your only friend in this shitty world despite you both being on completely separate journeys. However, at some point he decides that he should search for his son deeper underground. And by the time you make it to Lost Izalith towards the end of your journey, Solaire is noticeably more dejected than he has ever been up to this point. For the first time, his happy attitude has turned into hopelessness. Whether the journey is just finally taking its toll on our friend or being deep underground away from the sun is making him question his beliefs for the first time. And this would prove to be a bad omen, as the next time we see Solaire, he isn't himself at all.
Finally, I have my very own son. I am the son. I've done it. I have. Yes, I did. Oh, my son. It's heavy. It's dark. So dark.
Our dear friend and the man who once encouraged jolly cooperation has been fooled by these fucking piece of shit chaos bugs. He believed one of these to be his son, but the maggot was just taking advantage of his life's journey to simply find a new host. And as the saying goes in this game, if you lose purpose in life, you go hollow. And that is exactly what happened to Solaire. He lost his faith in the sun and in turn lost himself. And at this point, the only possible thing you can do is put him out of his misery. This is the only way you can get his armor set, and a great way to remember not only a brave warrior of sunlight, but also a dear friend. Thankfully though, there is one very roundabout method of saving him. But it involves advancing in the Chaos Servant Covenant and taking the back way into Lost Izalith to kill that stupid fucking bug before it's able to kill him. And if you do save him, you're actually able to summon him in the final fight against Gwyn, where he eventually links the fire in his own world. So there is no way to avoid Solaire dying in some way, but at least in this way, he dies by becoming his very own son. Miyazaki has stated, though, that his death by the maggots is the general norm ending, which makes sense considering a new player would likely never figure out how to save him without outside resources. So for that reason, and all of the meaning behind his first death that I talked about, as painful as it is, I do consider that to be the canon ending of our friend. And that is why I chose Solaire as the most depressing fight in Dark Souls 1. God rest his soul. Alright, Dark Souls 2 time. Everyone knows I love me some Dark Souls 2, and the lore is actually insanely slept on in this game. And someone at the heart of Dark Souls 2 lore is exactly who we're going to be looking at. I am of course talking about King Vendrick. Long before the events of the game, Vendrick was a brave warrior who defeated the four Great Ones in order to establish his kingdom of Drangleic. And it was after this incredible accomplishment that he met a woman with unparalleled beauty from a distant land who would soon become his wife, Nashandra. After the two fell in love and got married, Nashandra began telling him that there was this grave threat across the sea, the Giants. And they also held the cure for the curse of the undead, which is affecting him and everyone else inside of Drangleic. Fully trusting in his wife and filled with the desire to protect the kingdom that he built, he set sail across the seas to defeat these giants who wanted to destroy his home. And he did just that, with him defeating almost all of the giants that he came across with his queen at his side, claiming many of their powerful souls. After the battle, or more accurately, the genocide, the two returned home with an object that they found in the home of the giants, which is never specified as to what exactly this object is. However, he used this object to create the golems, which are powered by souls and eerily resemble the giants of this game. And he used these golems in order to build Drangleic Castle for his wife to thank her for the warning about the giants, and for retrieving the item that supposedly can cure the curse of the undead. So after the battle and the golems building this grand castle, everything seemed to be right in the world. However, everything I've talked about up to this point is not what it seems. Vendrick's wife Nashandra orchestrated the entire thing. You see, she is not a beauty from a distant land. She's not even actually the human that she's pretending to be. She is actually a spawn from the abyss. When Manus was defeated back in Dark Souls 1, his soul was fragmented into different parts of humanity. And Nashandra herself was one of these fragments. And not just any fragment, but the fragment of humanity that represents desire. And a super cool detail in this game that conveys her true nature to you during your playthrough before it's clear that she is evil, is whenever you approach her portrait inside of the castle, your death meter begins rapidly rising. Such an eerie but smart detail that they took the time to add in. And at some point, Vendrick realized that this thing that he stole from the giants was not the answer he was seeking, and more importantly, Nashandra was simply using him the entire time. When we go back in time and we are able to speak with Vendrick, he actually refers to his wife that he loves so much as nothing but a foul creature who thirsted for power more than any other. And at some point he discovered that she was after his soul as well, something he would not allow her to get her hands on. And shortly after he had this horrible revelation, the giants began invading Drangleic out of hatred and revenge, understandably so. I mean, they literally didn't fucking do anything. And at this point, Vendrick probably realized just how manipulated he was in all of this. In his mind, he sailed across the sea to stop the threat of the giants while also getting the cure to the undead curse that plagued him and his people. But the reality of the situation was that he committed genocide against the giants and wasn't any closer to his cure for the curse. And as the giant lord began wreaking havoc on the castle and Drangleic itself, King Vendrick seemed to completely disappear. He locked his soul and crown away in the Shrine of Amana where Nashandra could never get her hands on it, and sealed himself inside of the undead crypt. It is here where he just waited for himself to go hollow with his most loyal knight Velstad defending the door. At least until a human strong enough to kill him can come along, and that's your role in all of this. And when you first see him, you see the kind of awful state that he was left in. The once proud king of a prosperous kingdom just wanders in circles mindlessly for all eternity. Unlike practically every other boss in the series, he is so brain dead at this point that he doesn't even bother to attack you. You can simply take what you need from this chamber and leave while he continues wasting away in the dark. And while he certainly isn't free of the crimes he committed, he truly believed that what he was doing was for the good of his people. And interestingly enough, when you do fight him, he is actually more weak depending on the amount of giant souls that you have in your possession. And that is why I think Vendrick is the saddest fight in all of Dark Souls 2. But I think this Reddit comment pretty much sums up Vendrick's story faster than I could. And also, let his story be a lesson to anyone who falls for the hot goth girl, alright? It's just not worth it. She's probably just a fragment of Manus, father of the abyss. So let's talk about Bloodborne, another Souls game ripe for the picking when it comes to sad fights. And honestly, I think the first mandatory boss of the game conveys this perfectly. Father Gascoigne. Gascoigne was a hunter of the Healing Church who, like many others, was tasked with hunting beasts. He had a partner named Henrik, and the two worked very well together and became well known among the other hunters of the Healing Church. And at some point, Gascoigne fell for a woman named Viola, who he had gifted a beautiful bright red brooch to. The two fell in love and eventually had 2 daughters together to create their own family. And at some point, he decided to leave the Healing Church, although he still worked as a hunter. The reasoning for why he left isn't clarified, but some people speculate that it was because he wanted to focus on protecting his family, while others say that he found out the same truth that you do in the game. The beasts that you're hunting were once people. You can actually speak to his daughter through a window where it's clear that their family was definitely very happy and full of love. But in a video like this, you can probably guess that it did not last forever. At some point, he began to feel this incredible bloodlust building up inside of him. And not only that, but he began forgetting his own wife and children. His wife, however, would always play a lullaby from a music box, which would calm him down and remind him of the love that he had for his family, with the song clearly holding some kind of significance to him. It was only a temporary solution, though, as Gascoigne began hunting beasts more than ever before, in part because of his bloodlust, but I believe he knew that he was a danger to his family, so he wanted to isolate himself from the rest of them. And one night, when he didn't return home, his wife Viola went out to search for him, leaving the 2 daughters alone in the house, along with the music box that would calm him down. Absolutely massive fuck up on Viola's part. By the time she found him, he was in such an awful mental state that in his confusion, he slaughtered the love of his life. Her body is still inside of the boss arena with that bright red brooch that he gave her still on her corpse. Gascoigne was so far gone, though, that he did not even grasp what he just did. He was so delirious that at this point there was nobody left who could reason with him. So when you show up in the graveyard that he's at, he's already on the verge of turning into a beast himself, which is unsurprisingly his second phase of the fight. And if you went out of your way to speak with his daughter and agree to help find her mother, she will give you the music box that Viola forgot to bring with her. Whenever you play this during the fight, it incapacitates Gascoigne for a while, and you literally see him try to fight for control. But of course, he is too far gone and reverts back to being a beast. So like almost all of the fights I talked about, the only thing we can do is put an end to his misery. And sadly enough, when you do defeat him, his final words are "forgive me." So in his very last moments, he had realized that he had mercilessly killed the love of his life and has left his daughters without parents in this awful town filled with monsters. And the worst part is that you can return to his daughter to tell her the news. And there are actually 3 possible endings to the daughter's story in this game after defeating Gascoigne. One ends with her dying from a boar, one ends with her turning into a celestial, and the last one ends with her dying after the blood moon rises. Thank you again, Miyazaki. Very cool of you not to allow us to just escort the little girl to the chapel. And another big reason I chose this fight is because of how early it is in the game. It's such an incredible introduction to the bleak world of Bloodborne, while also revealing to you that the beasts you've been fighting up to this point are in fact people. So yeah, I just really love this fight and think it does a great job of setting the tone for the rest of the game. Well, until you start finding out about aliens and it just gets crazy as shit, but that's a whole other thing. So let's move on to Dark Souls 3. I'm actually really excited to talk about this next one. Well, excited might not be the right word since it's still a bummer, but I get to talk about my favorite giant. That's right, I'm talking about Yhorm. One sad commonality in Souls games is the mistreatment of giants, as you got a taste of in the Dark Souls 2 section. And Yhorm is no different. He's actually the descendant of a great conqueror who, as you may expect from his name, conquered the profaned capital. The common theory is this person is actually High Lord Walnir, as he is the only other one in the game described as a great conqueror. And interestingly enough, Yhorm was actually the one chosen to lead the capital from the very same people that were subjugated under his ancestor. You see, Yhorm was a very honest and forthright person with a very strong sense of duty, with him completely forsaking the use of his shield after he lost the one closest to him. The reason why he refused to use his shield isn't explicitly said, but I like to believe he felt like he didn't have the right to protect himself if he couldn't protect whomever he cared about so much. And if you've ever played Dark Souls 3 and fought him before, you'd be familiar with the weapon that you used to kill him, the Storm Ruler. And while a lot of people simply picked up the weapon and killed him rather easily, it's very important to ask why in these games. Why would Yhorm's weakness be sitting in the very room he's waiting in? And that's because he gave one of two Storm Ruler swords to his people as a gesture of trust, as it is his weakness. He understood that his ancestors conquered the profaned capital and how intimidating that must be for the people, along with his giant size, of course. So he decided to give them a weapon that could kill him for their own safety and comfort. That is the kind of giant that Yhorm was. Despite these genuine gestures of kindness, though, the people still did not really trust Yhorm, feeling either resentment or shame by choosing a giant as their leader for no other reason than their own weakness. This uncomfortable relationship led to Yhorm feeling very isolated and alone, understandably. That is, of course, before our best boy Sigurd came in and befriended the giant, a gesture that Yhorm probably felt extremely grateful for. And while Yhorm was destroying any threats from the outside, the real threat would be coming from the inside. Now, it's a little hard to explain this next part without going into a bunch of info about the overall story about Dark Souls 3. And this is about Yhorm, so I'm going to try and keep it brief. So there were 4 cultist witches who created the profaned flame inside of the capital. It looks no different from a normal fire at first glance, but it holds the darkness of the abyss deep within and inspires cruelty in those touched by it. This, of course, posed a great threat to the people, so Yhorm decided that he would link the fire himself. But before doing this, he gave the second Storm Ruler sword to his only true friend in the world, Sigurd, and tasked his friend with killing him should he ever fail in his duty. And shortly after this, he made his final sacrifice for the sake of those who only ever doubted him. And, awfully enough, this noble sacrifice would prove to be almost completely meaningless, as when you enter the capital, there are countless bodies melted together all over the place, clearly as a result of the profane flame getting out of control, essentially making his final act of kindness completely meaningless. And as time passes, we can see in the opening of the game that the previous Lords of Cinder have risen from the dead, including, of course, Yhorm, who returns to the profaned capital and realizes that he has failed his people. So he simply sits on his throne, waiting. And when you finally reach him, Sigurd is right beside you, prepared to fulfill the promise that he made to his friends so long ago.
Yhorm, old friend. I, Siegward of the Knights of Katarina, have come to uphold my promise. Let the sun shine upon this Lord of Cinder. It seems I am in your debt, once again. My thanks. I could have not kept my promise without you. Now, for a final toast. To your valor, and my old friend Yorm. Long may the sun shine.
That is Yorm's story and why this fight is so sad. And this shit really pisses me off. Like, I know this shit is fictional, like it's not real, but like what fucking assholes? This kind giant was doing everything he could for these people and they could just give a shit about him. But God bless Sigurd for bringing up the mood at the very end. They really do not miss with Onion Knights in the series. And now for Sekiro. I was torn between a few options here, like the Demon of Hatred and the Guardian Ape fight is a lot sadder than I think most people give it credit for. But no fight in the game broke my heart more than the one that you have with Emma. She doesn't have as much lore behind her as the others on this list, but that's because her backstory is not what makes this fight sad. Similarly to Solaire, Emma is present throughout your entire journey in this game and genuinely helps and cares about you. But while in the Solaire fight he lost his mind, the role is reversed in this scenario. Emma is only available as a fight when you decide to go down the path of the Shura ending, where essentially you become a being that completely discards emotional ties and fully embraces violence and death. So yeah, super evil ending. And in the most pivotal moment in the entire game, your father asks you to obey the Iron Code, which essentially translates to sacrificing your young lord that you spent the whole game protecting and killing your allies for the sake of the code. Which Owl could give a fuck about. The only thing he wants to do is further his own interests and is using the code to try and convince you to help him. And I'm sure literally everyone, barring a few psychopaths and people who weren't paying attention, chose not to do this. However, if you do decide to take Owl up on his offer, you essentially prematurely decide to end the game right here and now before you even reach the later areas and bosses. Emma arrives and witnesses your betrayal as Owl orders you to tear her apart. She sees Shura in you and is aware that you aren't acting like yourself, but knows that she is now forced to kill you. But of course, in this ending, you are the one who emerges victorious at the end. And this may be me reading into it a bit too much, but it seems like he really holds her for a brief moment after the killing blow. Almost like killing her was him killing the last bit of humanity that he has left. Right after Emma, the second phase of the fight begins against Ishin. But not the beast that I talked about in my last Souls video, rather the version of him that is very close to death. And while he is not nearly as tough as his Sword Saint version, he is still more than capable of fucking you up. But like the fight with Emma, you tragically emerge victorious in the end. And your father begins celebrating that nothing is in his way anymore before you cut him off by stabbing him directly in the back. He starts to ask why you would do that before realizing that you aren't even Wolf anymore. You fully transformed into Shura. In a series filled with sad endings, this one really stands above the rest. And fighting the kind woman who helped you throughout the game really makes you feel like an asshole. So much so that I did it only once for the Platinum Trophy, and I don't think I will ever do that fight ever again, because I believe that this is the most depressing fight in all of Sekiro. And now finally, we get to Shmelden Ring. This may be just because of all of the bosses in this game, but when I first think back on a lot of these fights, I can't say a lot of them made me feel sad. Most of them are like, yeah, the world did not need another ulcerated tree spirit to spit fucking flames in my face. But of course, there are definitely sad fights inside of this game. And I'm sure a lot of you can already guess where I'm going with this after talking about Solaire. As if there was any doubt, I think it's fair to say that I think Blythe is the most depressing fight in the entire game, even after the DLC. Blythe was originally created by Ranni's two fingers to act as her shadow when she was at a young age like the other Empyreans who were candidates to succeed Marika. These shadows are made with the intent of not only protecting the candidate, but also making sure they do not stray from the greater will's wishes. Blythe, however, didn't have a master and servant kind of relationship with Ranni. Rather, he is described to be almost like a stepbrother to her. They both trusted each other very dearly, and Blythe had a fierce loyalty towards Ranni. Which is why when Ranni essentially kickstarted the events of the game by ordering the Black Knives to kill her brother Godwyn, Blythe still stood with her. and as you're traveling through Limgrave in the beginning of your playthrough, you can hear a strange howling noise that really stands out. If you return to Kale the Merchant, he actually tells you that it's someone named Blythe and teaches you a signal to call him down. He also believes that you two will hit it off, which he could not be any more right about. As soon as he jumps down, you guys immediately start shooting the shit, and he talks about some bitch ass named Darrowell who is a traitor.
The name's Blythe. I'm looking for a man who goes by Darrowell.
Now, to be honest, even after searching, I haven't been able to find a concrete answer as to why he hates this Darrowell so much, but I believe it is because of his extreme loyalty to Ranni that him being a traitor just really makes Blythe angry, and any enemy of Blythe is an enemy of ours. So when we enter the Forlorn Hound Everjail, we see a summon sign for Blythe where you both can take him on together. And after the fight, he's grateful and gives you a somber smithing stone too. Kinda mid, but it's the thought that counts. He also tells you to mention him to a giant blacksmith in Raya Lucaria for special treatment because he figures he still owes you for the help, showing that he is a genuinely grateful person. And when you visit Ranni's Rise, he also says hello to you and reminds you of who he is, as if we could ever fucking forget. And now that you've officially entered into Ranni's service, Blythe really begins to trust and respect you as a companion. The next time you cross his path is when he is looking for an entrance to Nokron, the Eternal City deep underground. And although he can see it, he just cannot figure out a way to get there. So after some investigating, we find out we need to make our way to the motherfucking Festival! He can be seen in the waiting room where he wants you both to give them a show that they will remember. And you do exactly that by defeating Radahn in one of the coolest and most unique boss fights in the entire series.
What a sick way to fight, eh? The glory of the clash is shared by Radahn and you. And did you see that afterwards? A falling star right before our eyes.
Like, come on, he is the fucking best. Unfortunately, the next time we meet, he is trapped inside an Everjail by his friend Iji, who we also know to be a chill guy at this point.
I don't understand. Why would Iji do this? I could never intend harm to Lady Ranni. What's he thinking?
So we go visit him to see why the hell he would trap him in an Everjail.
I presume you've spoken with Blythe? Very well. There is something you should know. The Two Fingers gave Blythe to Lady Ranni as a faithful follower. Her very shadow, incapable of treachery. But if Lady Ranni, as an Empyrean, resists being an instrument of the Two Fingers, the shadow will go mad, transforming from a follower into a horrid curse. But such is his destiny. In such matters, Blythe's own thoughts hold no weight. It pains me so. But he must be neutralized. For Lady Ranni's sake.
Yeah, so there it is. As I mentioned earlier, he was originally created by the Two Fingers for keeping her safe and ensuring that she doesn't betray the Greater Will's wishes. Which, as we have been helping her and Blythe up to this point, we know that's exactly what she has been doing. And the only reason that she's avoided them up to this point is because she burned her original body. And if she continues on this path, as Iji says, Blythe will begin to go mad and pose a threat to Lady Ranni. So, Iji had to lock his friend up for her safety. But there's no way that Blythe could do such a thing, so we release him from the Everjail since Ranni has already left the tower to continue her mission anyway. But whether you release him or not, the next time we return to Ranni's Rise, this is what's waiting for us.
No. I'm part of her very being. I can never betray her, no matter what might happen. Ranni, she needs me.
We see him fighting his instincts as hard as he possibly can, but it's no use and he begins lashing out at us. And the only way to honor his wish of protecting Lady Ranni is to end his suffering ourselves. And a lot of people in the Elden Ring community connected with Blythe, so I'm sure a lot of you watching right now know the pain of this fight all too well. You just keep bumping into each other and casually chatting while fighting for the same purpose. You both take on General Radahn together. You really build a connection with this guy just for Miyazaki to spit in your face for getting emotionally attached to such an amazing character. And that is why I think Blythe is the most depressing fight in all of Elden Ring. And that's the video! Sorry if I completely shit on your mood, but fights like this are seriously one of my favorite things about the Souls series and what makes them feel so special compared to other video games, even if the pain is real. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more nerdy shit like this. We're getting so fucking close to hitting the 1,000 sub milestone, so it would really mean a lot. And also, for one of my future videos, I'm planning on doing an Elden Ring Night Rain wishlist video, and I want to use some of your ideas. Even the crackhead ones, like an Ornstein and Smo Godskin duo team-up or something. So let me know your ideas in the comments, and I'm going to use some of them in that video. I will also link the sources that I used for this video in the description if you're interested, because I really had to trim the fat on a lot of these lore explanations for time's sake. And finally, don't forget to always kill Celovus in all of your Elden Ring playthroughs. Fuck that guy.